Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're going to be looking into something a little bit spooky.
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about abandoned America, kind of those places that we left behind, kind of the forgotten places with dark pasts. And
Mm-hmm.
we're basing this one on an episode of the podcast, Spooky Trails Uncovered, called Abandoned America, Forgotten Places with Dark Pasts. So,
Okay, cool.
yeah, should be interesting.
Yeah, sounds fun.
So we're basically going to be traveling across the U.S., virtually, of course, and we're going to visit some deserted towns and buildings, and we'll uncover the chilling stories behind why they were abandoned and what mysteries remain.
It's so interesting to me how these places become kind of like time capsules, you know?
Yeah,
Like they're
right.
just filled with remnants of lives lived and events that kind of shaped our history
Yeah,
that offer such a unique glimpse into the past
definitely.
and often reveal like these uncomfortable truths about the choices that we've made as humans and, the consequences.
Absolutely. And our first stop on this journey is going to be Centralia, Pennsylvania.
Right.
It's a town that's been literally burning
Literally.
for over 6 decades.
Wow.
An underground coal fire ignited back in 1962, and it's been burning ever since. And what I think is so striking about Centralia is that this wasn't, like a natural disaster or anything.
Right.
It was a fire that was sparked by human actions. And it's a reminder of the lasting impact,
The consequences.
yeah, that our actions can have on the environment.
Yeah, for sure. And that fire, it's been smoldering beneath the town, releasing toxic gases and creating these crazy sinkholes. It actually forced most of the residents to evacuate by the 1980s,
Oh, wow.
and it turned Centralia into like a legitimate ghost town. But the interesting thing is that despite, dangers and the official evacuation order, a handful of residents just refused to leave.
Really?
They just chose to stay. They clung to their homes and their community even as the ground beneath them burned.
I can't even imagine that, like, it's one thing to want to stay in your home and you're comfortable there and all that, but when it's like literally dangerous, yeah, that's crazy to me.
I guess it speaks to like how strong the ties to a place can be for people you know.
Yeah.
Their whole lives and memories are rooted there.
And I guess when you've lived there that long too, you've already seen so many changes.
Mm,
So what's one more, right?
right.
But you can still see to this day smoke seeping up through cracks in the road like the earth is exhaling.
It's such a powerful image.
Yeah, it really captures that ongoing struggle between nature and human intervention.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that this almost apocalyptic landscape served as inspiration for the video game Silent Hill.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
And they went beyond just like the visuals too.
Yeah, the game really uses Centralia's story to explore themes of, like isolation and guilt and environmental disaster. So it taps into those very real anxieties that I think we all have about our relationship with the planet.
For sure.
It's a powerful reminder of the consequences
Definitely.
of our actions.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that some residents chose to stay in Centralia even after all that, I think it raises these ethical questions about individual rights versus collective well-being.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it forces us to consider how far we go to hold on to our homes, our history, even when we're faced with such like dire circumstances.
Yeah. That's a tough question.
Yeah.
There's no easy answers there.
So from the smoldering remains of Centralia, we're going to move on to Philadelphia,
Okay.
but not for a cheesesteak this time.
Right. Hey.
Our destination is Eastern State Penitentiary, once a pioneering institution, but for all the wrong reasons.
Oh, yeah.
So Eastern State Penitentiary was infamous for its use of solitary confinement.
Yeah, it's like a method of imprisonment designed to induce penitence through complete isolation.
Right.
Like their thinking was cut off all social interaction, and then the prisoner will be forced to confront their crimes and just repent.
And the architecture of the prison itself was designed to kind of enforce that isolation. Each cell was like its own little world.
Yeah, like a miniature solitary world with its own exercise yard and a toilet and like even a skylight, just to provide like the only contact with the outside world.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
However, the reality of that was way more grim than what they were hoping for.
Oh, for sure. Prolonged solitary confinement. It often led to severe psychological damage for these prisoners, which, eventually prompted them to reevaluate this method of punishment, but
Yeah, a little too late for a lot of
a
people.
little too late. Yeah.
And even notorious gangster Al Capone wasn't immune to the psychological effects of this system. So while his cell at Eastern State was more luxurious than most, he had a rug, he had oil paintings and all that.
Still solitary confinement, though.
Right. But he reportedly claimed to be haunted by the ghost of James Jimmy Clark,
Oh, wow.
who was a victim of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre,
Oh, yeah.
which Capone orchestrated.
So he's being haunted by one of his victims?
Yeah.
That's pretty ironic.
Yeah, and I think it adds like another layer to the already dark history of the penitentiary.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's such a stark contrast to Capone's public persona,
Right.
like this tough guy, this mob boss being tormented by, one of his victims. It reminds us that even individuals who are known for their hardened exterior are vulnerable.
Everyone has their breaking point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So leaving the confines of Eastern State, our next stop takes us to Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky, a place that was initially intended for healing, but ultimately became synonymous with suffering and death.
It's always so sad when a place meant for good becomes associated with tragedy.
Yeah, and it was built in the 1920s as a tuberculosis sanatorium, and Waverly Hills housed thousands of patients during a time when tuberculosis was a huge public health crisis.
Yeah, back then, sanatoriums like Waverly Hills were seen as like the best hope for treating tuberculosis.
Really?
But unfortunately, treatment options were very limited, and the disease claimed thousands of lives at Waverly Hills.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it got this dark reputation it holds today.
And that sense of hopelessness, like just the sheer scale of loss, it contributed to the development of all these chilling stories and rumors.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and one of the things that they highlighted in the podcast was this really eerie feature of Waverly Hills called the body chute.
Oh, yeah.
It was a tunnel that was used to discreetly remove the bodies of deceased patients.
I can't even imagine
Yeah.
being there as a patient or a staff member.
Yeah, just that constant presence of death and that fear of contagion just permeating the atmosphere.
Yeah, I'd be terrified.
Yeah, and I think that practice of like hiding the death from view kind of reflects the stigma surrounding tuberculosis at the time.
For sure. There was so much fear and misinformation about the disease, and it likely fueled that decision to conceal the deaths from the public
Yeah,
and from other patients.
from the other patients.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like the secrecy coupled with the tragic loss of so many lives. It's just fertile ground for all the ghost stories and paranormal rumors
Oh, yeah.
that surround Waverly Hills.
And there's one story in particular that focuses on room 502, where a nurse allegedly hanged herself.
Oh my gosh.
It's almost as though the suffering and the loss, it just soaked into the wall,
It's palpable.
creating an atmosphere that's just ripe for these tales of the supernatural.
Yeah, you can really feel the history in a place like that.
Yeah, and I think these stories, regardless of whether or not they're true, they offer a way to grapple with the unsettling emotions that kind of linger.
It's a way to process what happened there.
Yeah, and to humanize the unimaginable through these narratives. And speaking of human resilience in the face of tragedy, we were just talking about all the death and suffering at Waverly Hills. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a different kind of abandoned place,
Okay.
Bannack, Montana.
Okay.
So unlike the confinement of Eastern State or the suffering at Waverly Hills, Bannack kind of tells this story of boom and bust, of dreams that were pursued and fortunes lost.
Right, it's a very different kind of abandonment.
Yeah, this wasn't a place of illness or punishment. It was a booming gold rush town back in the 1860s.
Oh, wow. So like Wild West vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And Bannack really embodies like the allure and the danger of the American frontier. It drew prospectors from all walks of life, this promise of wealth and a chance to reinvent themselves.
It's like the classic American dream story.
Totally.
Yeah.
But alongside those dreams of riches came lawlessness and a constant threat of violence. Life on the frontier was often pretty brutal and unpredictable.
Yeah, it's kind of a romanticized period in our history, but the reality was probably pretty harsh.
Yeah, for sure. And the podcast highlighted the story of Sheriff Henry Plummer,
Okay.
who was this seemingly respectable figure who turned out to be the leader of a notorious outlaw gang.
Oh, wow. Talk about a plot twist.
Yeah, it's like a real life, kind of thing that you would see in movies.
That makes you wonder who you can really trust.
Right. And it really shines a light on the complexities of frontier justice,
Yeah, in a place like Bannack, where there wasn't much formal law enforcement,
Right.
people had to kind of take matters into their own hands.
And Plummer's story really highlights that inherent tension between order and chaos that, defined life on the frontier.
It's like the Wild West was truly wild.
Yeah, and it also reminds us that appearances can be deceiving. Even those in positions of authority could be caught up in this web of greed and violence.
That's true. Power can corrupt anyone.
So what I find so fascinating about Bannack is that it isn't just a memory.
Oh, right.
It's been preserved as a ghost town with over 60 buildings that are still standing.
Wow. So you can actually visit it.
Yeah, you can wander through these deserted streets and almost hear the echoes of the past.
Yeah.
Like the clatter of saloon doors, the shouts of the miners, the whispers of fortunes made and lost. It's like a tangible link to this pivotal era in American history.
That's incredible. It must feel like stepping back in time.
Totally. Yeah. And it serves as this physical reminder of the gold rush's enduring legacy.
Yeah.
It allows us to step back in time and think about the dreams that fueled westward expansion, the impact that expansion had on the landscape and indigenous populations, and the cyclical nature of boom and bust economies that continue to shape our world even today.
It's a reminder that history isn't just something in the past, it's still shaping our present.
Absolutely. All right, so for our final destination today, we're going to fast forward quite a bit, and we're going to go to a more modern example of abandonment. Six Flags New Orleans.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of that. It's eerie.
Yeah, this theme park, once a bustling center of entertainment and laughter, now stands as a stark reminder of nature's power and the vulnerability of what we create. Six Flags New Orleans was left to decay after Hurricane Katrina back in 2005.
It's a powerful image of how nature can reclaim what we build.
Yeah, and the images of the abandoned park are truly haunting. Roller coasters are submerged in swamp water, their tracks twisting like skeletal remains, overgrown vegetation creeping through the cracks in the pavement. It's like nature is slowly reclaiming this space that was once dominated by human activity, and the silence, it's heavy. It's a stark contrast to the screams of joy and excitement that you would have heard there before.
It's like a post-apocalyptic movie or something.
Yeah, it's like you see the familiar elements of a theme park, the roller coasters, the ticket booths, the concession stands, but it's all twisted and warped by nature's forces, and it's like the familiar becomes unsettling. It creates this dissonance that's both fascinating and disturbing.
Yeah, I can see that.
The abandonment of Six Flags really speaks to the fragility of human structures in the face of natural disasters.
It's a reminder that even our most elaborate creations can be undone by forces that are completely beyond our control.
Yeah, no matter how much we try to control the world, nature always finds a way.
That's for sure.
And of course, with any abandoned place, there are those inevitable ghost stories.
Oh, right.
And with Six Flags New Orleans, there are these whispers of spirits that are trapped in the floodwaters forever, seeking refuge in the remnants of the park.
It's interesting how these stories pop up in so many abandoned places.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because we're trying to make sense of the loss?
Maybe. Yeah. I think whether we believe in ghosts or not, those stories highlight our fascination with the unknown. Our desire to find meaning and explanation when faced with tragedy and loss.
It's like we're trying to fill the void left behind.
Yeah, and it allows us to process that unsettling reality of abandonment and to kind of imagine what might remain long after we're gone. It's been a really thought-provoking journey so far, seeing all these different places and hearing all these stories, but it kind of leaves me wondering what it all means for us. Like, are we all supposed to become urban explorers venturing into these abandoned places?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the takeaway here, but exploring these stories, even from afar, can offer some valuable insights. It's about cultivating an awareness of the fragility of our own creations and the impact we have on the environment.
Right, and that lasting impact.
Yeah, and the power of history,
Yeah.
It's a reminder that places, they hold stories even when we're not there to tell them.
It definitely makes you realize that history isn't just something we read about in textbooks.
Yeah, it's all around us.
It's embedded in the landscapes around us, both the places we live in and the ones that we leave behind.
And sometimes, exploring these abandoned spaces, it allows us to gain a fresh perspective on our present.
How so?
Well, it's a way to connect with the past on this visceral level and to understand how our actions today might shape the landscapes of tomorrow.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it like that.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Our choices today can have consequences that extend far beyond our own lifetimes.
This deep dive has definitely sparked my curiosity. I'm already thinking about other abandoned places. I want to learn more about. What about you? Are there any that have particularly piqued your interest?
Well, the podcast episode we were talking about, they mentioned listeners, sharing their own encounters with abandoned places. And I'm really curious to hear if our listener, maybe they've stumbled upon any forgotten corners either in their travels or through their own research.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, maybe they have a personal connection to one of the places that we've talked about, or, maybe they know of another location with this captivating story that's just waiting to be told.
Yeah, exactly. And we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, if you have any abandoned places that you've encountered that have left a lasting impression on you, We want to know, what are the stories that they hold, and what lessons can we glean from their silence?
It's easy to think of history as something static, unchanging. But these abandoned places, they remind us that it's an ongoing process.
Okay, I like that.
The stories they tell continue to evolve as nature reclaims them, as our understanding of the past shifts, and as we reinterpret their significance for the present.
So the next time you come across an abandoned building, a forgotten pathway, a deserted town, don't just see decay, you know.
Yeah, look closer.
Look closer, and you might just find a window into the past, a story waiting to be uncovered, and a reminder of the power of time and memory.
I think the most important takeaway from all of this is that even in abandonment, there's beauty, there's history, and there's a story to be told.
Absolutely.
These places serve as these poignant reminders of our past, our resilience, and the interplay between humanity and the natural world.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey into abandoned America. It's been really fascinating.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the stories of these forgotten places alive.